Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well today. In this video, we're going over all things flight model and control surfaces, a couple of the updates that we got recently from Yogi, just responses on Spectrum, and some things I did want to go over with you guys just to keep you updated on what's going on with this new flight model. First things first, I want to apologize for not getting any uploads out this week, really. It's been super busy. We've been moving houses, so been lacking my setup and Wi-Fi for a few days, and that certainly has not helped me getting any videos out. So I appreciate you sticking around and being here. I am going to be uploading this to the hotspot, so we'll see how that goes. But if you are enjoying the content and want to stick around, feel free to subscribe. I do have channel memberships open if you wanted to go the extra mile, and feel free to join the community Discord. I would love to have you there. Besides that, let's get into all of the new updates regarding the new flight model. Now, starting this off, we had just someone on Spectrum criticizing the current flight model where it's too floaty. Ships kind of feel like styrofoam, and no matter how big or small your ship is, you can basically maneuver and float around in whatever direction you want without any consequences. This is something I totally agree with. I actually have a whole video discussing the nose down issue, which covers a lot of what he talked about in this post. If you want to check that out, I will have a link down below for that. But fortunately, Yogi gave us a pretty solid response. Now, basically, he started this off with saying, hey, with the new updated flight model tech and control surfaces and whatnot, this will be changing. And generally, this is a pretty difficult situation to deal with because they don't want it to be too difficult to actually fly your ship and land and all that stuff, but they also don't want it where you can just hover and nose down forever and ever and ever. I totally understand this, and he basically offered up two solutions that they are looking at here. The first one, and the one that I think everyone is kind of expecting, is balancing thruster efficiency so that basically when you are in the standard Earth gravity, your ships can only really hold a hover if they are using VTOLs, which I think a lot of people would agree this is kind of the way we'd hope it would go. Now, the second option that he talked about here was basically adding some fake flight model stuff that would autocorrect your ship or even limit it. And again, this is something I think a lot of people would really try to avoid, but he did kind of clarify a little bit more what he was talking about. Now, good news is that it does look like Yoki naturally wants to go towards that first approach, which I can totally appreciate. I think a lot of players want that as well. And I think that's the more enjoyable route to go, even if it is a little bit more difficult. Now, speaking of it being a little bit more difficult, there are a couple things that Yogi wants to consider when it comes to this. I think, especially when it comes to landing your ship. So, the first thing is automated controls that are going to help you kind of keep from dipping over, especially when you are trying to land. I could see this being a huge issue with some of those vertical hangars that you have to just hover out of. If you don't have a proper mode to get out of that situation, I could totally see it ending with players just kind of crash landing constantly. And understandably, I would want them to avoid that as well. So hopefully they could implement some sort of solution there. And he also talked about how he wanted some sort of reliable indicator for your thrust to weight ratio against gravity that takes cargo weight into consideration. Now, I think this will actually be really important, especially for cargo haulers and people just hauling around these bigger ground vehicles. If you do happen to overload your ship, you need to know that you overloaded it so that when you do try and fly off, you don't just absolutely annihilate your thrusters and have to like repair your ship. Or if you do actually land on like a moon, load up there, and then go to a planet with some harsher gravity, instead of just falling out of the sky and not knowing what's going on, having some sort of indicator so you kind of know what you need to do, I think will help in those circumstances. I think this is a more specific situation, but again, I think it will be important just to make sure that players are aware of what's going on around them. And then the other thing that he does mention here, and something that has been talked about for what feels like forever now, is some sort of camera that'll let you look down without having to point your nose down, basically a landing camera. And this is, of course, something we've talked about for a long time. So I'm not surprised he does mention this here, but I think that will be a really big helper for players, especially those that don't really know what to do whenever they're in first person flying a ship. I totally get it. It can be scary to land, and especially with this updated flight model, I can imagine it's a little bit more difficult, but I do think having a camera of sorts will help us a ton, at least new players. Now, this is where Yogi kind of wrapped up this reply by basically saying, hey, they're very deep into the flight model updates with, control services and the new quantum tech. Totally understandable, but they are going to get to the topics of atmospheric ship hovering pretty soon, which is good news. Though it doesn't necessarily mean that what he's talking about in this post is ultimately going to be in the game. Now, whilst I would love for everything that he talked about to actually arrive with this control services update that we'll get at some point, I do also understand the need for balancing and making sure that the experience isn't too punishing for players. Personally, I sit on the side of wanting control surfaces to be more difficult to master, so it's generally more immersive, probably more balanced across the board, and I think it's just enjoyable to have something to master over time with different sizes of ships and whatnot. Now, at the same time, I do understand the need for, ships to not be impossible to fly for newer players, and I don't want players, constantly falling out of the sky and crashing just because it's too difficult. So, I do understand the need for balancing, but I really, really do hope that Yogi and their team over there does a really, really good job at, making sure that it still feels really rewarding and immersive, but also not too difficult so that players aren't just constantly falling out of the sky. Now, that really is the biggest reply from Yogi. I think that gives us the most information as to where they're at and kind of where they're heading with the flight model. There were a few things worth noting in some of their replies as well. One of them is the fact that they have not been Joker carded since the jump points were added, at least. So I think this is actually a really good thing to hear because it kind of reaffirms that they are, very consistently working on this new flight model and they aren't being taken away to other things. Basically, if you don't know what a Joker card is, it's something they talked about at the beginning of this year that, hey, if they needed a team to work on something, they're going to quote unquote Joker card that team. So they basically pull them from whatever they're doing and just get them on whatever they need help with. Fortunately, again, they have not been Joker carded, so they have been able to focus all their attention on all these flight model changes and whatnot. So, really glad to hear that, and hopefully, it stays that way for at least quite a long time. The only other thing really worth noting is the fact that Yogi did confirm how they do want to do some sort of, testing for this beforehand, whether that be through a Arena Commander or the EPTU. I'm not sure. I would really hope for the EPTU. I think testing across all the planets and moons would be super beneficial, especially with a larger audience. But we will see what they want to do with this. It does look like they have plans for this, though, in the future. Now, that really is going to wrap up our video for today, but I really, really would love to hear your thoughts on this subject. I think control services and all the updated flight model stuff is super, super exciting. I just simply can't wait for not only like people to stop nose downing with their ships, but just having more immersive and enjoyable flights that I feel like are a little bit more memorable than what we have now. Currently, just like the original post said, it is very, floaty and you can kind of do whatever you want. I just can't wait to see a little bit more depth go into that flight model and hopefully bring out a lot more enjoyable gameplay. My big question for you though is would you rather the more casual flight model that Yogi talked about, like where you have some fake limiters, so it's a lot easier to actually stay afloat and not fall out of the sky? Or would you prefer the more punishing side of things where it's a lot more systemic, there's a lot more depth and a whole lot to master? Personally, I'm much more on the punishing side of things. I think that would provide so much more immersion just to have it where everything kind of works super systemically. There weren't any limiters, anything like that. If you screwed up, you screwed up. And if you fall out of the sky, it's on you and you'll have to learn the next time you get into a ship. I prefer that, honestly, just because I think that would be a little bit more enjoyable. But again, I would love to hear your thoughts on it and just generally your opinions on the whole new updated flight model. Again, I apologize for not posting too much as of late. Just generally been so busy with this move. And then I will be, on a vacation next week, which is, perfect timing. But I will try and get as many videos out as possible. And I'll probably schedule a couple beforehand so I can get you guys something. But I will be bringing my laptop with me on vacation. So maybe I'll just have a quick update video here and there. Besides that, though, thank you so much for watching and sticking around. If you do enjoy the content, feel free to subscribe. I would really appreciate that. I thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video.